Давайте, наверное...
Okay, then let's probably start. Thanks a lot to everyone who came. First of all, I would like to introduce the panel that we're now going to present. This panel is dedicated to the investment attractiveness of Ukraine, and we have colleagues at the panel who are from 3 possible investments into Ukrainian economy, meaning internal investment, investment of international financial organizations, and foreign investments. So these are 2 of these categories. And it is rather telling, I believe, that among us, there is not a representative of some big foreign investor, and probably one of the questions we're going to discuss is why and how do we achieve it. So the following conference or the conference after it, at the same panel, we would have someone who would represent a big international business with very big investments in Ukraine. That is why at our panel, I will present from the left to the right and from you to the right, Francis Malige. He's a managing director of Eastern European and the Caucasus for the EBRD, who spends more and more time in Ukraine lately, paying more and more attention to our country. Thanks a lot to him for that. And I also present the biggest foreign institutional investor in our economy in all possible planes and aspects, from loans to direct investment to investment in institutional capacity. He is the second, Jean-Jacques Soulacroup, who is the corporate banker at the EU Neighbouring Countries Department, European Investment Bank. Jean-Jacques is going to tell us more in detail about his role, but European Investment Bank is an institution which is less involved in politics, but it instead has a more infrastructure agenda, as well as state investments. Infrastructure, municipal investments, and investments on the level of big infrastructure projects in the country. Kovaliv, who represents the Office of the National Investment Council, attached to the President of Ukraine, and we're going to talk about the role which such organizations play in attracting investment. Vasily Ivanovich Khmelnytsky, if you allow me. We have lots of French-speaking participants. In French, there's this very good word, industrialiste. So actually, Vasily is a match for this definition because he's among big industrial investors into Ukrainian economy and probably one of the leading internal investors, developing both traditional industries and something that should become the basis for further development in the future, new technologies, IT, and education. Dan Bilek, who is the head of office for Ukrainian Invest and also chief investment advisor to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, which is institutionally different for continuing investment. We're also going to talk about it. And Andrei Gorokhov, general manager of UMG Investment Company, probably a person who has shown that out of this set of rather different and various assets, it is possible to have this well-organized investment company with an investment strategy, and with the increase of cost and capitalization of all those assets which are included in there, and now dealing with the further development of this direction, the direction of investments into non-ore materials in the territory of Ukraine, and also presents something that I've been talking about in the beginning, a very big investor, international economy, but a national investor of our Ukrainian economy. So before the start of the panel, I actually tried to launch the format of something we're going to do and asked our colleagues to talk less about successes, because we do read in newspapers about successes, but actually why something didn't work. And I asked each of them to tell about their own experience of work in involving foreign investors, about the experience of working with internal investors, about as for those who don't work in Ukraine, and the lessons learned from failures and actually failures themselves. I know I don't want to be too pessimistic in this discussion, so first of all I'm looking for optimistic conclusions and just generally conclusions that will help to change the situation we have in the country and significantly increase the investment attractiveness of Ukraine. So that's why I'm hoping that this is how we are going to conduct our discussion in this hour and several minutes. The format is going to be the following. There are 10 minutes for each speaker, plus after that we are going to open the floor for questions and answers so that you had the chance to ask questions to each speaker and actually enable the extension development of what they were saying or focus on something which is interesting for you as visitors of this panel. We are going to start left to right, so I'd invite Francis Malige first, our EBRD representative.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I hope everyone can hear my English. We decided just now that we're actually not going to hold a panel in French, even though the majority of speakers can speak the language. But we felt that was going to break the communication with the audience somewhat. So you'll have to bear with my English. And I'd like to apologize because I won't be able to stay for the entire duration of the panel, but I'd like to share some comments with you and about what we do in Ukraine and how we see it and how our clients also see it. You asked us to be, I don't know, not overly optimistic. I am still optimistic because well, we're the largest investor in this country. We invest across industry, infrastructure, financial institutions. We play a big role in helping the country modernize itself. And I must say, when everyone looks at the ranking of the country in the various rankings that the World Bank has, that the World Economic Forum has, and so on, and overall, they confirm the impression that we have investing here and talking to our clients, which is that the situation is improving. Ukraine is ranked better in the doing business ranking of the World Bank, is ranked better in other important rankings. Now, what's important also to look at, in my view, is that these rankings are averages of a different number of things. And when it comes to, for example, difficulties of trading across borders, difficulties of getting electricity, which is one area where Ukraine was particularly bad, really close to the bottom of the scale, it's actually become much better. I also would like to say this is a country where when investors speak up, and thanks to people like Julia and the Investors Council, their voice gets heard. You know, those of you who who know EBRD know that I like to speak about this particular blue building in the port of Odessa. That is that's a story. I know Julia is laughing, but that's a story I like to tell because it has both an element of optimism and also a small element of pessimism in the story. For those of you who've been to Odessa, you know how cramped the port is, right? There's not much space. It's very well, it's very much occupied, and some of it could be restricted. But it's not a port that has huge space to expand or to install new equipment like you have in Yuzhny, for example. And we have a client out there, which is in partnership with one of the largest grain traders in the world, who's built super modern silos in order to be able to help export the grain that makes the wealth of export of Ukraine so far. And just in front of this silo is where normally, it's very simple. You've got these big silos to put the grain. On the seaside, the ship comes. On the land side, the trucks or the train comes to fill the silos. Except that, on the land side, there was a huge, completely empty, completely unusable blue building. Happened to be blue, so we call it the blue building. And it's been there for a long time, and despite all the requests of the client, despite all of the requests to the port authority, it's very complicated. You ask the port authority, they say, no, you should ask the harbor, you should ask the municipality. Okay, so nobody is responsible. Whoever is responsible says, oh, I can only do this when the ministry has approved my budget, whatever. So in the end, we started pushing, a number of us, and thanks to the support of Boris Loshkin and of the team and other people in government, finally the blue building is gone. So, wonderful. That's a great victory. Now, the small element of pessimism in that is, it shouldn't take me, or anyone else for that matter, standing in front of that building and opening my arms and saying, tear down these walls, right? It should be done without us having to ask, because it should be done as a matter of course. You have a port which is vital for the country, even more so now that some of the coast has actually been put outside of the control of the authorities. You have a port which is not, where there's not lots of space where each square meter matters, and we have to wait for a building to be torn down. So that also sends a message to investors that things are not as easy in Ukraine as they perhaps should be. Nevertheless, the building is gone, so business can go on, and that's what matters in the end. Now, two small things that I'd also like to say to these rankings. I'm concerned with two of the components of the Doing Business ranking that have actually gone down since the revolution, and one of them is getting construction permits. Now, if you're an investor, you come into this country and you want to set up a plant. Well, you need to construct it, right? Or even if you buy it, you actually need to build some things into it. So if it's harder to get construction permits now than before the Maidan, that's a big problem for investors. And the other, and now going a little bit more into the new economy, yesterday we heard the MP from Sweden talk to us about innovation, about the innovation economy, and so on and so forth. The one other factor that has actually gone down in terms of the rankings since the revolution is enforcing contracts. Now, what's the most important factor for innovation? What's driving people to innovate is their entrepreneurial spirit, but is also to do it in a place where they know that their ideas will not be stolen from them. For that, it is essential that the court system works, that you can enforce contracts, because property rights, the reason why innovation develops so much in a place like Silicon Valley is that property rights are very, very much protected. So if we can't enforce contracts properly, it's going to be much harder. It doesn't mean there's not going to be innovation, but it's going to be just a little bit harder. So, what I'm trying to say, I think the key message is, there's been tremendous change in the past 3 years. And I don't want to forget this. I don't want to be pessimistic and negative in things like the banking system, in things like the way the energy sector has evolved. You've all heard, I'm sure, that there is a difficult situation right now with the board of directors of Naftogaz that needs to be replaced and so on. But and certainly it is a concern. But let's not forget where we were 3 years ago and where we are now. So huge progress. The country went back to the capital markets just a few weeks ago, was able to raise money without a guarantee from the US government or anyone else, without any support. And I think that's also a great positive thing. It is a sign, it's actually a sign of the success of the reform that have taken place. So it is like Ukraine went on the starting line, went through the race, finished the line, finished the race, won the race. There you go. won the race. Gold medal is coming, all right? But what do you do when you're an athlete and you've won the gold medal? The next day, you go back on the track. Start training for the next one. Because winning this gold medal is not going to be enough. Because having raised 3 billion on the market is a great thing, but the country will need more. The country will need to go back to the market. Eventually, the country will not be under an IMF program at some point in the future. The program is designed to last until 2019. After that, Ukraine has to run its own races without anyone else's support. And so this is not the time now to drink too much champagne and party all night. This is the time to prepare to be back on the racetrack the next morning and to continue with the reforms that are so important. And that there, I think, lies the difficult part, because there's another race that's coming that matters a lot to a number of people in this country, and that's the election. And so the election dynamics and the reform dynamics, I don't think are enemy of each other, and certainly I think should not be. And when I see everything that's been achieved, I would actually be very, very disappointed if there was a rollback of some of these reforms. This is not time for rollback. This is time to go on. This is time to make more effort, because the road ahead is difficult. There's going to be, by no means is the, for example, the reform of Naftogaz complete. By no means is the reform of the banking sector complete. There can be some pushbacks. There was, for example, just this week, an attempt to push back on one of the key reforms that have been successful, which is that of the electronic receipts for VAT. When I came to this country 3 years ago, the number one complaint I was hearing from people is VAT is impossible to get back when I export. There's constant bribes, there's constant, and if you don't pay the bribe, you don't get your money back, and so on. Actually, going back to the indicators underneath the doing business ranking, paying taxes is one of those that has actually improved quite markedly. So that is a great improvement. I don't hear it anymore from my clients. They don't call me anymore and say, can you talk to the finance minister about my VAT credits? So that's one achievement that has absolutely to be preserved. There was an attempt to roll it back, and that doesn't make me very optimistic for the future, but the fact that it was makes me optimistic. So let's not forget that we need to continue to progress. We'll have to play defense at some point, but I'm still optimistic about the opportunities to invest in Ukraine. And I think that the country has so many opportunities that are not taken because there's this perception that things are still difficult. But the moment we improve the law and the legal environment, the moment we improve the courts of law, and the moment we improve the rule of law environment, that's where we'll see the growth really pick up. And we will not be disputing whether a country can grow 2% or 3% or 4%. We will be discussing whether it can go to 7 or 9. And that's exactly what we should be aiming for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll probably speak in English now so that Jean-Jacques understands my introduction. But Jean-Jacques Soulacroup is the senior corporate banker at the European Investment Bank, and he had a pretty long career with the European Investment Bank, which took him to China, Mongolia, and to many other countries of the world, and he specifically developed business of the European Investment Bank in China. And now he is responsible for the countries of Eastern Europe at the EIB, including Ukraine, neighboring countries as they define it to the European Union. European Investment Bank started to do quite a few reasonably large projects in Ukraine. It would be interesting to hear your point of view of what needs to be done, what is stolen, and again, not to be overly optimistic, not to be overly pessimistic, but still get the objective rather than flourishing view of what we have in our country.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sergei, and again, thank you very much to invite the European Investment Bank to such a prestigious and successful forum. I always like to start my presentations by by telling you a small anecdote. 2.5 years ago, when I started to work on Ukraine, I was in a forum like this one and chatting with people, and at what point somebody told me, oh, so what are you doing? Who are you? I said, well, I'm from the European Investment Bank. And then the person said, the EBRD. No, European Investment Bank, you know, we are a separate bank. They say, okay, you are a subsidiary from EBRD. Okay, come on. So there is a long road to go in terms of communication and being known in this country. And as a matter of fact, my colleagues and I, we have done a tremendous work. To give you a very small figure, we have lent 1 billion per year for the last 3 years to Ukraine. So we are becoming a significant player, and I'm pleased to say that we are complementary to our colleagues to EBRD, because I always used to say, they have the brain, we have the muscles. So we are complementary. So we don't do the same work, but still, we are very much involved into infrastructure. That's very true. About 2/3 of our portfolio was into infrastructure, be it municipal infrastructure, transportation, and so on and so forth. But the most interesting part for you is the 1/3 that is left, which is basically financing of SMEs. We have been very active, and mostly through local banks, to try to support the SMEs, which are struggling, as you know, all of you, to get access to finance. This has been a mixed success, or a mixed failure, depending on the way you look at it. Mostly because there are, as you all know, a lot of hurdles into implementing and to bringing money to the real economy. I won't invent anything new. I don't pretend to be creative into this. These are the usual suspects, you know, corruption, the conflict, the war, these countries at war, government reforms, and of course the financial crisis. Just one figure to put that back into perspective. Corruption, according to Transparency International, Ukraine ranks to 131 out of 176 countries. That puts you in between Paraguay and Nigeria. This is absolutely, in my opinion, and this is a very personal opinion, this is absolutely unacceptable given the potential of this country and the quality of the people in this country. So how come Ukraine is at that level? There is so much potential that you could easily overcome this bad ranking. Well, of course, because we need stability when we do business. All of you, you know that. And all the international financial institutions are here to help. But there is something to be done. Government reforms, a lot has been done. And congratulations to the government. Definitely, we are very pleased to see that. Francis was mentioning some of the key ones. But on the contrary, on the opposite side of the view, are we missing the big elephant in the room here? We are not talking about judicial reform. This is something very true. And this is something that needs to be tackled in order to tackle the institutionalized corruption, which is in fact the worst deterrent to do business in this country. And of course the financial crisis, because we need a functioning banking sector system. We are here to substitute to the failing banking sector. By chance, things are improving fast, but still, as soon as the banking sector will be functioning well, we would be very happy to withdraw. That's something very clear. Now, in terms of the very European Investment Bank perspective, which is a very pragmatic institution, in fact, what we have a hard time to find are companies that regroup these, I would say, 5 key ingredients to be bankable. The first one is the capacity to have hard currency revenues, or at least revenues indexed into hard currencies. Given the financial situation, the financial crisis, it's very difficult for this company for us to identify such companies because we cannot lend into hryvnia. The second element that, in our opinion, is missing a lot in this country is a proper sustainable business model. A lot of companies, and this is understandable because of the very past recent history, one of the very typical situation is that the private companies have a very short-term view of their business. They are unable to project themselves into long-term investment, long-term development. And this is something that is really missing, because when we try to help a company, we cannot find that, and we are lending on long-term. You know, we want to lend to 7-10 years, and when you have a business plan that and a business model that just tackles the next 2 years, then we can't work together. We need long-term view, in fact. One also very obvious, but still it's worth mentioning it, is compliance. KYC compliance, tax. All these issues are very, very critical, and I will get to this point later. Another aspect is your capacity to get proper guarantees. It's not only collaterals, but also guarantors, because as I said, your business model might be weak, but if you have partners that are able to support you, then that would be really, really key. And one overall topic, one overall issue that unfortunately you cannot do anything about that is the credit rating of the country. Because as a bank, we are limited by that. So even if your business, I would say, is a BBB+, your country is rated B. And we cannot go beyond that. It's standard credit features. So you asked me, Sergey, to give you an example of a good and an example of a bad project that we finance. One very good project that we finance is Neighbouring. So it's a very large company. You all know this company. They are very good because they have this approach of sustainable transportation through the river network of the country. So we were very pleased to finance this country together with EBRD. This was a really nice success story, and we would like to repeat it. And in that, I would highlight the fact that they are innovative in the way they do their business. And this is something that you have to think about. Don't go for the standard investment. Try to be creative. This would be the plus that would incite us to finance you. One not so good example, I have been working for 2 years with a company that wants to invest into renewable energies. Very nice. The topic is fantastic. But the history of this company is that it took them 10 years to get the land permits and the building permits. 10 years. This is extraordinary. And in addition to that, it took them 2 years to finally get the financing because of the credit rating of the country that prevents us to finance their project on a project finance basis. So these are 2 examples that I would say are very typical and where we could do something all together. Finally, I would like to close with, you asked me also to talk about quick wins. In our point of view, quick wins are very simple and very pragmatic. First, you have to adopt what I would call an international corporate culture in your companies. You have to get rid of the old thinking. You have to open up yourself into the most advanced way of doing business. You know, it goes from modern corporate governance to modern management as well, performance-based management, corporate social responsibility, all these things that sounds very fashionable, but in fact are very real and translate into real business. I think this is something that you really have to be aware of. Another quick win is to learn how to talk to international banks and international investors. When we are getting into knowing a company, what we need to know is what is your project. So you have to present it in a very structured manner, very professional manner. This is something that could sound obvious, but which is absolutely not. I've met tens and tens of companies. I could count the number of companies on one hand that were able to give me a proper pitch, proper business model, a proper presentation of their own company. So don't take anything for granted. For us, it's extremely difficult. For international investors, it's extremely difficult to get access to this very basic information that we are used to. So we can make a step forward, but you have to make a step towards us. Thank you very much. Okay.
Наступне слово буде надане Юлії Ковалів.
Yulia Kovaliv is going to speak next. Yulia. Was the member of the supervisory board of the Naftogaz of Ukraine. Now she works in the office of the National Investment Council under the president of Ukraine. It's very interesting. What's her idea about the situation with the which we have in Ukraine, and the big international companies are not participating in this panel today. Thank you very much for your question, for the invitation. Actually, I don't agree to what you've said, because when you were introducing the members of this panel, you said that unfortunately there are no, foreign companies and they don't work in Ukraine. But they do in reality work in Ukraine, and there is quite a number of those. And if you look at the list of the members of the European Business Association, American Chamber of Commerce. The number of the members is increasing every year, annually, and the number of the companies which start working in Ukraine, and especially within the last 12 months, is increasing. But I would like to start from a different idea. When we started to shape up the institution, which we call now the Office of the Investment Council, we were talking to 20 analogous structures, government or non-government structures of various countries of OECD. We have been working with the colleagues of the Eastern Europe, Asia. We even talked with the colleagues from Chile. And, there were very interesting questions discussed. What do you do to help attract foreign investment into the country? And I would say that maybe for good or for better or worse, the answer is very banal, and there is nothing new in comparison with what we were discussing previously. Three key things which are basic for stable attraction of the investment. This is macroeconomic stability, first of all, because the majority of the investors who come to the country, especially when we are talking about the big investors, and it's important for Ukraine, especially taking into account the crisis we lived through in 2014, 2015, the risk of the inflation and the decrease of the economic growth is great for these companies. And why do we see that the companies manifest more interest to Ukraine? At present, Ukraine is #1 top investment destination rating, and one of the reasons is because we, thanks to the efforts we took for the last 3 years, jointly with the IMF, we were able to reach macroeconomic stabilization, and this is a basic factor without which we cannot talk about the large-scale investment implementation of the investment projects. Is impossible. It will be just wasting time. And the second and banal thing and factor, it's the cost of doing business in Ukraine. And again, we are discussing it for a long time, the decrease of deregulation to decrease barriers for entering the business trade, because the business is evaluating all this from the point of view of its operational costs, and they look at us, at the country, while comparing it with other countries, which compete with us, and they decide where to invest. We have to be very pragmatic. We are competing, and we are competing not only with our neighboring countries, the countries of Eastern Europe. We are competing on the global level, in the global world to attract the investment. So this positive dynamics of the simplest and the most popular rating of doing business is very important for persuading the investors that Ukraine is a country where it is worth investing into. And the third factor, in the first two factors I quoted, we have quite a good progress, and we can boast of it. But the third factor, and Sergei wanted us to be very critical and very sincere. Well, here, unfortunately, we have a lot of challenges. We call it room to invest. And this room to invest could be created either through the mechanism of privatization or concessions or opening the land market, which is a very topical issue for Ukraine, or through creating the partnerships, public-private partnerships, which works very effectively and efficiently in other countries. Here, unfortunately, we still have a lot of challenges ahead of us. Unfortunately, the land market is not operating. We are working on launching it. And privatization, we have been discussing for several years, is not working, and the results are not significant. I hope that jointly with the EBRD, with Francis and his team, by the end of this year, we are going to offer the draft law for concessions, and it will create this room for investment. And it is also very important to properly develop and create the partnerships, because from the point of view of the investor, the country is very risky, and building the partnerships with the state or with the state companies is one of the tools which gives additional guarantees and creates some comfort for the investor. Well, it sounds banal that we have to develop the system of corporate governance, but my colleagues from the European investment banks say that it's very important in the private business, and it's even more important in the state-owned companies. And it's a challenge which we face. And we have not resolved this issue, and we have to do a lot of work to introduce this corporate governance culture. And the fourth factor is to be proactive. It's marketing. And when we are reading the news in Ukraine, and we have accounts in Facebook, so the impression is that everything is awful in this country, the impression is, and everybody is betraying the country. But when we go outside the country and prepare the presentation and start to say what we've done within the 3 years, one feels optimistic that we've done a lot of very good things, and the basis has been built, the foundation has been built. And it's very important not to decrease the rates, the tempo, and to do all those things to create the room to invest. And so that we would be able to go over from discussing the potential agreements to actually discussing how many agreements have been signed. And the building trust is the fifth factor. Sergei asked me to give examples, good and bad examples. So building trust is very important factor, which unfortunately we cannot do up till the present. Well, I'd like to tell you a story. It started in 2015 during the crisis. Nobody was coming to Ukraine, and even some of the insurance companies, the insurance companies were not insuring of the risks of spending time in Ukraine. The government then called a meeting, and we invited the representatives of the diaspora, international partners, and we have carried out a business forum, a very successful business forum, and it was named Ukraine Outside This Country, abroad. And the government signed with the private investors a memorandum of cooperation, and they just specified the role of each party in this implementation of this project. And this is a public company, a big one of the biggest one, and the project is being implemented, and everything was okay. And all of a sudden, one of the authorities, which is working on the protection of the national interests and the attraction of $100 million, increasing export, was not a strategically important project for Ukraine, and it might cause damage to the budget. Can you imagine? We spend so much effort and time to persuade people to invest in the land, which is not not going to be used, and the buildings on those plots of land will be transformed into those blue buildings Francis mentioned. It was much bigger damage, and it might destroy the trust of the investors to the state, to the Institute of Partnership. But thank God, this was not really taken seriously, and the project is going to be completed next year. But all these things seem to be, small things at the level of the state, but if there are many of those, they create irritation among the investors, and they undermine the trust. And trust in business is one of the most important factors when you enter into the partnership. And we face a lot of work ahead of us. We need to do a lot of work. And the sooner we focus the efforts and concentrate the efforts to do all our homework inside this country, and the more all of us, when we are traveling abroad and we try to promote this country and do all of us, maybe then in 12 months from now or in 2 years from now, here in this panel, there will be more Ukrainian investors, international banks, and who invest, but maybe we will see more representatives of the companies which will be telling their success stories to us.
If you allow me, Vasily, I'm going to give you the floor, what Yulia was actually saying. Some rather transformational stories, starting from construction, which was in a very dilapidated territory. Now it transforms into a very advanced place for living. And finishing with the creation of an industrial cluster, a big one in Bila Tserkva, which directly participated in the creation of rather significant for the country and even significant for the world of certain production in some niches of the market. Your opinion is interesting. I mean, from the point of investment attractiveness of Ukraine, you are the source, the internal investor, the national investor. What do you think about the country that you invest into? Okay, thank you. Of no doubt, I'm an optimist, but probably I'm more a realist. I'm in the real sector, and for me it is important what is happening today in the country. Yeah, okay, look here. In 2 years, I met about 100 companies. My team is 200 or 300. These are the foreign companies that I wanted to convince so that they started working and building. I don't have a positive example. I have certain developments. Somebody is saying, okay, we'll look and all that. Everybody is saying, let's look into the future, how this is going to work, what is going to happen. But I just wanted to not tell about my failure or the failure working with these companies. I wanted to tell you my own example. I have a company which has 40% of foreign investment. We are working in the country. We have an enterprise, not one, but two. And now we're building the third one. This is a pharmaceutical enterprise. There is an old one. The new one is totally new, using totally new technologies. We also have about 500 people working. The average salary is 10,000 hryvnias, which in this segment is not too bad, in Bila Tserkva especially. During the last year, we paid about 60 million in taxes, all taxes. And what's also interesting is that lately we started losing tenders. We used to win, but now we started losing. And we started losing to the companies which do not have the representative office in Ukraine. Of course, they don't pay bad taxes. And moreover, this company always wins 40%. I mean, its product is more expensive than we have. And of course, you can always say, like once a tender that just happened, that the volume of different product than different label. Of course, we're trying to work with this. We're doing this way, and then some other thing would work. And then I see that this is a road to nowhere, because in equal conditions there should be Ukrainian company which wins, which creates this jobs, which pays this. And of course it was well said by Trump, you know, buy American. But here I just wanted to translate it for people who know English well but understand the gist. It's like buy American in America, but buy it actually by Ukrainian. And often they have this methodology. This like, we have to bring all the production to America. You have to stimulate business. And okay, you have to produce in Ukraine. You have to encourage business. You have to buy Ukrainian product, and this is very important. And Yulia has rightly said, American Chamber of Commerce is extended, and the companies who would like to sell a product, they are actually extending. They narrow, those who want to produce, they narrow it down. This is a disaster. This is a problem, because they don't see another option. But let's learn from Americans, Polish and Turks, because I brought this Turkish company and I say, okay, you buy grain from us and you produce flour in Turkey. They are the biggest producers of flour. And let's build it in Ukraine. Like, we can do it for $10, but in Turkey it will be a few dollars. And like, well, great, that's a good idea. But how many subsidies does the state? Because here 50% is given back to the state. I'm like, well, for now they don't. Well, if they don't, then for now we'll just be buying the grain, the raw materials from you. But in Poland, if you are building a factory, 50% of the taxes are given back to you. And again, this is a real mechanism. We simply need to learn and quickly implement in our country. I don't see any other option. We have to build enterprises, and here we have to create jobs. Like, there's this good historical example. Ford raised this salary by 2 times for its workers so that they could buy cars. That's a good idea. Okay, so let's build enterprise and resell so that they could buy products, which is going to move Ukrainian economy. And I don't like it. I don't like this word stability. Everybody is talking about stability, and stability is now, and that's okay. We need not stability, we need growth. But growth means creation of jobs. There is no other option. Thank you. Well, now probably Daniel Bilek would like to add something about where we can find investment, because Dan is also the head of investment involvement at the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, and he's institutionally responsible for attracting investments into the country. So we're really interested to find out. Okay, thank you. Sergei. Probably the first part would be in English for direct dialogue with investors, and then I would talk to Ukrainian business afterwards.
It's great actually going after all of these people, because half the things I wanted to say have already been said, so I can focus on a few key issues. Ukraine is not a country with a corruption problem. Ukraine is not a normal country, let's put it that way, with a corruption problem. Ukraine is a country that is undergoing a massive transformation. In fact, we only started building this country 3 years ago. And I think that context is very important, because you're able to see what's been done and what hasn't been done in this compressed time frame. We started 3 years ago having lost 20% of our GDP, 60% of the value of our currency. We had $15,000 in the government's current account and gold reserves amounting to a cover of 1 month's worth of imports. We had 6,000 battle-ready soldiers that were trying to defend the loss of 7% of our territory. On top of all of that, we now have a situation where we have to reorient 70% of our economy to completely different markets, away from Russia and towards Europe and other markets. This is akin to building a massive ship while at sea with a handful of competent people in the middle of a hurricane. So it's not an excuse, but I think it's an important explanation of both the opportunities, the challenges, and the successes, and perhaps some of the lessons that we have to learn to improve as we go forward. And I think that when we look at these transformations, we have to look at, put the fish on the table and talk about the biggest issue that has been discussed here, and that's corruption. There are two types of ways to fight corruption. You can put people in jail, and that's a justice issue, very important for legitimacy of your institutions. And there's the institutional way of fighting corruption, which is actually much more important down the road. Because we are only building the institutions of state in this country today, now. We are, at the same time as, with the ship on the ocean analogy, at the same time as deconstructing the Soviet edifice that we inherited, we have to build institutions of democracy in this maelstrom of change that is taking place, both inside and outside of the country. That's a big challenge, but it's also a massive opportunity. And when we look at what Francis termed the blue building, when we look at some of the other challenges that investors face, one of the important lessons is that, yes, this shouldn't happen. Yes, it was difficult, but actually, we solved the problem. And it was a lot of work. And it's not because it's such an obvious thing. It's because there are a lot of vested interests in this country. We are still fighting in this transition, in this transformation. We're still fighting the battle between old Ukraine and new Ukraine. And it gets played out in society, it gets played out in the Verkhovna Rada, and it actually gets played out inside the government every day. And, but the point is that there are now institutions that are being developed, whether it's the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, whether it's Ukraine Invest, whether it's the Export Promotion Agency, whether it's other instruments that we have to try to help business. I don't think anybody can say that there has ever been more dialogue between business and government since what we've had, even in the last 3 years and the last 1.5 years. And so I think that these are very important points to remember. When I was appointed, I told the Prime Minister, I'm not doing any road shows until there's actually something to talk about. And in our foundational year, what we have focused on is trying to help existing investors unlock the value of their investment, of their future investments. Because we realized very quickly, sort of one of my penetrating glimpses into the obvious, that if you have happy investors in Ukraine today, they will tell happy stories to investors about being happy in Ukraine for their own investments. And because of the way that we've worked with Oksana Markarova, the government commissioner on investments, the Prime Minister, together with Yulia, together with building stakeholder communities, we work very closely with the EBRD, the IFC, and other IFIs. We've been able to solve the problems of the blue building, of the other blue building type situations. And we've unlocked over $700 million of investment this year that would still be stuck because they can't solve these problems of vested interests. Changing this is very difficult because you have to change the way public administration works, but we've managed to do this because there is much more transparency in the decision-making process and in the way that government relates to business. The VAT returns, automatic VAT returns that Francis talked about. The fact that Prozoro, the public procurement, award-winning public procurement system. When we passed the e-declaration requirement on the behalf of all government officials, 25% of all judges quit. That was automatic lustration. And now we're going into a judicial reform period. It's not perfect, but it's potentially a huge structural change. Decentralization also has unlocked the value in the regions. And when I talk to investors, I don't talk about Ukraine as a whole. It's too hard. I talk about regions and I talk about sectors, where their opportunities are. When you look at Western Ukraine and Central Ukraine, where we've spent an awful lot of time and effort, corruption is not the main problem. They're more concerned about infrastructure, they're more concerned about the lack of qualified, vocationally trained people. They're concerned about vested interests controlling unfair competition, which is an issue, cost of Oblenergo hookups, etc. And all of these things are systemic issues that we are trying to solve. And we do it together with business. Because I tell business, don't come to me with your problems. Come to me with your problems and a proposed solution. Because you can't come and just say, here, fix this. It's not that the government hates you. It's not that the government is incompetent. It's we don't have the capacity to change everything at once. Let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good, which is something we tend to do in Ukraine. And I think that putting the comments that we've heard in this context shows that there is a trend, there is a dynamism. Much more needs to be done, no question. And I think there is a commitment. If I didn't feel that there was a commitment, I've been here 26 years. If I didn't, I was born in a small Western Ukrainian village called Toronto. If I didn't feel that this was happening, I wouldn't be doing this job because I don't need this job. But we need to move the dial and we need to change the narrative. You know, and I'll finish with the example that Jean-Jacques gave of this renewables. This renewables project is actually a very good example because it's been 10 years in the work. But it's been 10 years in the work because we had to, the change has had to be made to the structure of the project because the laws kept changing. But the laws kept changing to improve the structure of the project. And it's a very complicated deal. It's 500, 600 megawatts of power. It's €1 billion project. This is massive. And it's also in eastern Ukraine, which is now on the front, near the front lines. But it doesn't have a backer that can finance off the back of its balance sheet. Hence the complicated financial structure. But it's moved forward. And in fact, Jean-Jacques, it's moving forward so fast that it's outstripping EIB's decision-making, pace of the decision-making ability. So you need to speed it up because we need you in this deal. And there are other deals that are happening in the same way. Okay,
and the last thing I want to say is for the Ukrainian business. A lot depends on you. How the investors are going to look at Ukraine in the future. You are the moving force, especially as you can unite, especially as you can on local level convince the authorities that they have to treat investors the way you treat guests in your own home. Especially in that case, you're also going to be successful. The problem of Ukrainian business is that everybody just solves their issues on their own through relatives and friends in power. They do the solutions and do everything to prevent your competitor from being successful. But that is doomed to failure. So, of course, you can join it all. You are all supporters of each other. You all want the same thing, especially as you want to become the owners of this process. And in this way, Ukraine is going to prosper. Thank you. That was really passionate. I have to be honest. Thanks a lot. Okay, Andrei, thanks for your patience. You are going to speak the last. That's probably the hardest thing. The hardest here. Okay, Sergey, as Daniel has said, it is the easiest option because, first of all, just look at our audience. It is full. And then the previous speakers already said and talked about the basics, what's happening in the country. So actually, I'll probably move to the executive summary and I'll try to be as pragmatic as possible because for the investor, these pretty words are important, but there are other things which are critical. That's cash-to-cash ratio, that's ROI, DPP, and finally the exit option. And if the investor doesn't see all that, we don't see him in our country. Of course, the investor hears the words, but he looks at the facts and judges by these facts whether he should come to a country or shouldn't, whether he should invest in some sector or not, or maybe he should just choose a different investment destination, which would give better profitability, return on investment, and combination of risk. And before this speech to be less subjective, I tried to match my own compass with at least 100 people from different Ukrainian business circles and associations. So that's why I'm not going to say negative things, because I'm selling, right? And we're investing in Ukraine. And we really need for the investors to come, but I'm also promising to be objective. So what do we have as selling points for external investments for ourselves? First of all, Francis has said it. There is a great pitch point about placing Eurobonds for 3 billion. That's a great achievement, because really it is confirmed by the facts that the investor quite probably is not ready for direct investments yet, but the system of Euroclear and the country risk, which we have in our country with the 7.7, and I mean the investor is fine with 3 billion. That's a great achievement, and I know that you also directly participated in all of it, so
foreign investment into Ukraine. Второй selling point.
So the second selling point would be what is happening with our GDP. Everyone who I've talked to were realistic / optimistic, and they were saying that in the following 3 to 5 years, our economy is going to grow between 2.6%. That's also great, even though in the end we had 2 crisis situations. The last one was especially hard. Our economy is at the bottom, but we are still moving ahead. The second question would be, where are we going to be in 20 years in comparison with other countries, even our neighbors?
Whether we are going to catch up with them or not, or should we move more aggressively so that we will become attractive investment destination for investment? That's the second question. But the most important thing that we are moving forward and in the right direction. And this is the third selling point. Everybody thinks that the vector of movement of Ukraine is a proper one, and we do not have negative feedback on this particular aspect. But people say that we should have moved quicker, less politicized, so that the conflicts of interest would be resolved quicker, and we would be able to see implementation of very good laws which are going to be implemented for the benefit of Ukraine, like, for example, the law on privatization, the law on concessions, and we would like to see the improvement of the regulations of the bank in terms of working with the bad collaterals, so that the managers would be working properly with the distressed assets, avoiding all the risks which are related to them in Ukraine. And land reform is one of the key issues to develop the agrarian sector of the economy and everything which is related to it. And from the list of the things that we would like to improve, are related to the joke I've heard many years ago at the beginning of my professional life, that the investor comes backwards into the room. Like, why? Because his eyes are at the exit. He looks at the exit. And if the investor is investing for 5, 7 years and 10 years, and we have to demonstrate how the exit is going to be organized. We have a stability, which has become, the most quoted word, and also we have to be able to do some some forecasts, and also we should not limit the movement of capitals. And this is what we face when the investor asks us, is it possible to arrange the flow of capital or not? And we are trying to say that the rules are being improved and the vector is correct, but actually give us a yes or no answer. And quite often we say, yes, we do have difficulties, and then the investors tell us, we will wait until you tell us, no, there are no limitations in terms of the flow of capital. And the second issue, which is an issue of discussion for some of the people, but I believe that the investors need the strategy, long-term strategy of development of Ukraine. And I believe that it's necessary to have, because when we are developing the portfolio companies, I understand that I would like, as an investor, to see the movement of the market, to see the opportunities, and to understand what should I do and when should I do to increase the capitalization of this company. And at a certain point of time, we would be able to exit from this business when we have developed it to a certain size. And, I have seen some drafts as far as the strategy is concerned, but for the investor, it's not sufficiently sufficient, and this is not the strategy is not high quality. And when it appears, it should be trusted into. But if we do not deliver on our promises, the investors stop trusting us and they stop building the plans which are related to this country. And this is the second issue. And the third issue is the cost of the capital, of borrowed capital. It's high domestically. The foreign capital is not easy to attract, especially when you start the greenfield project, when you start from scratch. The project financing in this country actually does not exist. But when we attract the Western financing, so the projects up to $15–20 million are not very much interesting for the investors. And these are the projects of the medium-sized business, which in a proper market economy make just a basis of the market, and they help to grow the market, to increase the market. And we can think that we might prepare and implement 5 projects which will be $1 billion worth each, but it will be taking too much time. But the entrepreneurs, investors consider that when big players are going to work on big projects, we will be able to implement hundreds of projects which will be like up to $5–10 million worth, and it will be difficult to do it without project financing. So on my behalf, I would like to say the following: please invest into Ukraine. And I think that people who are sitting in this audience are either thinking about it, or those who have started already to invest, they would like to understand, should we increase these investment? If they trust if you trust into Ukraine like an investment destination, so my advice will be do invest, but be cautious. And why cautious? Because you have to understand the specific features of the emerging market, and each emerging market has these specific features, and it's a normal, and it is possible to work with these specificities. There are local companies, local partners whom you could choose while checking their reputation, and thus you will mitigate partially your risks. And if you have the opportunities, it's worthwhile to use those opportunities. And the business on its side has to develop the quality projects, a quality pipeline should be developed, understand the people who bring the capital here, and they have to be client oriented. He who pays the piper plays the tune. We have to comply, and otherwise there will be no capital. Warren Buffett said a very interesting thing about the opportunities. Opportunities infrequently come when it rains in gold. Put out a bucket, not a whistle. And yeah, and I would like to wish all of us and the part of the investment community of Ukraine and those who are coming to Ukraine and those who are working for the state and tries and helps to improve Ukraine. So I wish all of us to use the market with a high liquidity, and we would put our bucket when to collect these drops of golden rain, so that we can improve the place of Ukraine in the international market, and all of us are going to benefit from it. Thank you very much, Andrei, for fundamental description of the situation we face now in the investment area. And on your permission, I would like to open question and answer session. On your permission, I would like to start asking the questions. I have one question to each of the panelists, and then I will open the floor for the questions from the audience. I hope you do have those, and I hope that we just made you think about all these issues, and you will have questions and you will have some opinion to share. On your permission, I am going to ask a couple of questions to the panelists, and then I will give the opportunity for the audience. Andrei, you have been waiting for a long time to speak here, and you, by definition, are in the business with a long horizon of planning, long-term planning. You start from the roof, if to the industrial development and emergence of the financial flow for the companies which are working in the mineral resources, and you operate with the horizon of 5-7 years. In 2014-2015, the feelings were that the situation was very pessimistic. And if you were planning long-term projects, so maybe it was mostly based on inertia, and it was based on the developments of the pre-war period. But now, as far as I understand, you start to develop your company on the basis of long-term planning. And what could you tell about the You are starting one of the a number of essential projects. So, do you see interest? And you are in the industry where there is the competition, and there are companies with which you are partnering, and there are companies with which you are competing. Do you see any foreign capital which is being invested into your sector? Thank you for the question. First of all, we have never been halting investments, neither in 14, neither in 14. They were even more than in 12 and 13. Our portfolios are various, not only mining sector. We have, we had a very good rate of growth. We were working on the markets, and we could not explain our clients in Mexico and Italy, just wait a minute, we are distressed, but the plants have been operating. So we were creating new pipelines of the projects, and everything was okay. Maybe we were very optimistic, not very realistic people, but it appeared to be that our stakes were correct. As far as the foreign investors are concerned, things we are trying to do now, our portfolio companies in particular, or within the framework of development of the new projects, we are fundraising and we create pipelines. Those are two standard aspects of our work. And the foreign companies and foreign capital is very important for us. And the strategy, roadshows, strategies and which have technologies, innovative technologies, which help to improve the efficiency of the production processes. So we really cooperate with those, and we are looking for an opportunity to set up strategic alliances. And there are quite a number of examples when we have entered into long-term relations with the foreign companies. We started from the pilot projects, and then they grew into full-scope cooperation. And when the situation calmed down a little bit, people came to sign the even more long-term agreements, and we started to talk about strategic alliances all over the world, so that they know co-activities from their point of view of their more mainstream businesses to give them to outsourcing, understanding the qualification of our mining companies, and depending on what we could have offered. But well, we have to deliver on the promises. That's the key message, and everything will work out. Thank you. Dan, I have a provocative-ish question, if I may. The Office of Support of Investment, me as an investment company, investment bank, are working a lot to attract international strategic investors, not only portfolio ones, but we are trying to attract strategic investors. And why should they come to your office? Thank you for the question. I don't know why, but there are lots of examples. Well, definitely. First of all, we are looking for them. We work not only with strategic investors, but our strategy is to build the foundation for investment and to build the investment attractiveness. But we are working proactively with certain global brands. At present, we have to bring here 5 or 6 giants which are known for everyone, so that the other people would think, why haven't they come to this destination yet? And we are promoting. We are like a catalyst inside the government. We have our own network of the stakeholders here in Ukraine. These are business associations. We are working with the business ombudsman a lot to resolve the issues. And Oksana Markarova is working a lot. And the Prime Minister, who is overseeing this work. And the idea of creating such an office was generated by the Prime Minister. And he emphasizes this always. There is openness to this process. So big investors come, they would like to see the Prime Minister. It's not an issue. If they want to see the President, well, we, together with Julia, we are trying to arrange these meetings, and we have to create the atmosphere of trust, and so that they feel at home in our hospitable house. And it works. We also tell us why they come here. It's not only because, well, we are interested in Ukraine and so on and so forth. Nothing is more mobile in the world like $1 million, because they could be invested in other places, not only in Ukraine. But Ukraine becomes more and more part of the global supply chain for those companies. We have a huge cluster of automobile components in Western Ukraine. 3,000 jobs, 500 million euro have been invested. And each automobile which is being manufactured in Germany uses, quite a number of components which have been manufactured in Ukraine. And a German investor talked to me, and he's not only tolling here, but now they are manufacturing here in Ukraine the components with a high added value, technological value, and they would like to expand this business. And he was asking for the meeting with the Premier. And this is exactly what we are doing, and this is what we need. But why does he want to meet the Premier? Why does he need that? Well, first of all, who doesn't want to meet the Prime Minister? Well, if you're an investor, everybody wants to meet a Premier. Yeah. Yeah, this is an absolutely normal situation, but the sense of your question and your hint is quite well taken. This is part of the building of trust, because they are not sure, so to say. We would like, they say, I don't want to invest because it's going to be expropriated. We understand the issue with the Ministry of Finance but the system of reimbursement of VAT has been improved a lot, and this is the opinion of the business. This is not my opinion, but our problem at present is the enforcement agency. It has not been reformed yet, and in each country which lives through the transformation from the system of totalitarian regime to the democratic system, it's the last area which is being reformed, the enforcement agencies, because these were the pillars on which the old authorities were leaning on. But when the Prosecutor General office started to attack Astarta, there were a lot of discussions with the Premier and the President to arrange a meeting with the representative of the big business. But before that meeting, this event took place, and it became like a blue ribbon of that problem. For 3 hours, the business had a meeting with the Prime Minister and the President and the Prosecutor General, and they were discussing it publicly. And it was mentioned, it was told from the rostrum, stop these attacks on the business. And we are now working on the criminal procedural code to avoid these barbarian approaches. Instead of bringing the weapons into the offices, let's start discussing it by email and provide the documents by email. And nobody refused to do that. And this is the process. Investors demonstrate more and more interest in Ukraine. And the rates of this development, it creates the virtual cycle. I feel the work with the enforcement agencies it demonstrates the desperation and weakness and not self-assurance in their position. So the system is going to change. Thank you very much.
Okay, Vasily Ivanovich, I probably have a question which has changed a little bit in comparison with the question I wanted to ask. You pay a lot of attention to education. You also pay a lot of attention to creating jobs in this country. And actually, yesterday, I protected this statement in a different format, let's say. And I think that one of the main problems of our country is the demographic problem we haven't really become aware of fully. I mean, the decrease in population, both natural and migration, multiplied by decrease in the quality and standards of education. You, as a big employer, as an industrial employer requiring qualified, highly qualified hands, what is your opinion about it? Do you see it as a problem for investment? First of all, I would like to ask a question. You were saying that police and prosecutor's office, this is going to change. When is it going to change? That's a question. I'm waiting for this. I'm looking forward. We are all looking forward. Okay. I wanted to provide this small remark here. Very often I hear from our officials that we need investment and we want the investors to come to take money to us, and I wanted to change it. We are creating a property, so this for investors who is going to earn it without risk. I mean, the investors do not care that they're investors. They just want to invest and earn. They're looking for opportunities. This is very important for us. As for education, I'm also going to make this example already provided. If there is one alternative, like Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Education, and there is a certain resource, what would be raised first? Where would we invent? In education or in economy? What do you think? Yes, education. And you know what? I would invest in economy. And listen here. And let's not fight. It's just my opinion. If we take super experts from the whole world. We get them from everywhere, and then we do this very strong education, like Finland, Canada, like super strong education, super universities, and we're going to have these great experts over there. And we won't give this person a job. They would go to Poland, like everyone now leaves for Poland or to the States or wherever. We have to create jobs, and we have to create an opportunity for a person who is educated to use the skills here in our country. And there's going to be more money from that. Of course, we'll spend it for education. People will start earning. They will have a choice where to send their son. And it is important, even if they go abroad, so that they come back with this experience. And actually, it's very important. Because you have to note, we have lots of talents living for abroad. In IT, it's like 5,000 per year. And these are not who just starting. They are those who have this super good results. This is our golden human resources leader. Why are they leaving? They're already educated. They can't find an opportunity to apply their knowledge here. If we create an innovational park, we have to create conditions so that these talents find the same conditions in our country, so that they get, financial support, legal support, like accounting, so that they feel like in Poland or in America. And I think that this is the key in our country, so that our people do not leave. But instead, we have to create this. They have to come back to us with experience. I would also like to say something. When I was saying that I spent 100 meetings with foreign investors, what are the 3 key factors? Why these investors, again, I won't be fighting with you. What are the 3 key factors, and why foreign investors don't visit us, don't come to us? Because we have great people, we have a super location, we have agricultural sector, which is very big, we have IT. Why do the investors come to us? So my personal opinion is like, okay, very few people are saying it, and nobody said that would say it about me, let's say. But anyway, lots of politicians go to around the world and they say we have the war going on, and of course that is a problem. But people don't really understand that there is the East, there's the West. When they say, okay, if it's the countries like Lviv, Kiev, Donetsk, it's all together. You just take the example of Israel, which is at war all the time. But they say, yes, we have problems with it, but it's stable. Our country is stable, and each investor is protected. And probably this is a big value for us. Last year we had this forum. There were 220 Chinese companies, Chinese-Ukrainian forum, and one Chinese person just said that he went to the trust room and said, well, these are the bravest Chinese who are not afraid to die. And, and I was like, what did you watch? Where do you get that from? What do you think? It's a stable country. We have a great city, all that. And everybody's proud of it. Okay, the second factor. That would be corruption. We do have to fight corruption, that's clear. But now we kind of go around the world and we just boast, okay, we have corruption. And, the second example, I was in Poland. And Poland, there is this economic forum, and there are lots of businessmen from Europe. Can you imagine? There is a panel on corruption in Ukraine. Not about development, not about investment. I had this impression that there were 6 speakers there, and only 3 participants who were there. And, the very fact about corruption, we really have to take it away. But, going there, it's... And I think very, very, very serious factor would be Ukrainian investor looking how Ukrainian business is developing. You undervalue it. It's good that you are looking for 6 super big companies to invest big money in Ukraine. But we should also have a department who's going to help thousands of Ukrainian investors and companies to actually develop this business. It's very important. The investor comes and wants to find a partner who wants to buy this and all, we have to move over in that side. Okay, how many people in this room, the businessmen who are maybe associated managers or whatever, could you raise your hand? Okay, then the second question for you, but please participate. Who has felt that in 2 years it just became easier for you? Please raise your hand. Okay. You know what? I think that economic growth and stability is going to happen when half of the people are going to raise their hands. We need for each businessman to feel at least a little bit some improvement over there. And that is going to be a driver of the economic growth. And actually, the mentality of Ukraine is changing a little bit. And I'm not going to be a pessimist. And we need to support our Ukrainian business. We have to create conditions to compete with other countries. Okay, thanks a lot. Yulia, we're a bit pressed for time because we really want some questions from the audience. Just 3 sentences, okay? What we have to do so that the following year we have General Electric on the panel. For General Electric, I think even in a month we can have them here. And we already have a signed agreement. I think we've done almost all homework for that. What we need to do, we have lots of people criticizing that we don't have any investments. Fewer people are saying that we need investment, but very few people actually work on that. And I'm going to say these 3 very simple things, and very briefly. First, for 2 years I worked in the government, and I can say that I already have this something which is closer to business, this feedback. At some moment, reforms have turned into a process, like we are all in reforms and everybody wants to be reformed, and everyone wants to call this reform. But if we speak about the point of the message, we need to have some good KPI in the end of this way. That would be investment and also new jobs. If we take education, privatization, if we're going to measure it and we're going to understand that we're not doing endless reforms where everyone becomes a reformer and gets for thousands of likes Facebook but still has this very specific result, then in a year in this panel we're going to have 3 additional channels. One thing. Actually I had the German to work with them. I was helping to develop the Asian market. Okay, there was foreign investor is going to come and they're going to see the behavior of Ukrainian investor. And here I'm for it with both hands. So what Vasily Khmelnytsky said, the first person who believes in economy is the one who lives in this country and works in this country. And why I was saying that we need to build these equal policies for everyone doing business, fighting corruption, so that it's comfortable for everyone. And the third thing, again, moving from conversations, discussions, let's sell at least 10 companies. We're not going to earn billions on that. I mean, Sergei, you understand how much they cost. It's about creating this investment. And quite probably, we all need to keep it in our heads. When yesterday I was preparing for the discussion, there was this one opinion of a vice president of IMF. During the discussion several months ago, he was talking about other emerging economies, that if we don't grow export, if we don't develop our economy, we become a big exporter of labor force and big exporter of our own people. And we need to become more applied in the things that we do, understand this link between the reforms and something very specific, some result. Okay, thanks a lot. That wasn't 3 sentences, but that was really to the point.
With my questions, and I still hope we will have some time because we started later for the floor to give us questions, but Very briefly, if you don't mind. You worked in China. You now working pretty actively with the Ukraine governments at different levels. Very interesting, your observation. Ukrainian municipalities, very briefly, difference between your experience dealing with them and dealing with Chinese municipalities. With the state, we have discussed it a lot, but we haven't, given the decentralization drive in our country, level of municipalities will become more and more stronger and more important. What's your view?
This is a very interesting question, comparing two different animals, almost two different universes. China is very specific in the sense that there is no real elected people at the local level. There is this very pyramidal structure where local officials are basically central government officials. So it means that there is not really any self-initiative. It's always coming from top to bottom. The greatest difference and the best opportunity for Ukraine is that in Ukraine, the municipalities have this capacity to and willingness to do something at the local level, because the local officials are most often coming from the regions or from the municipalities themselves. It makes a huge difference. In that sense, Ukraine is very close even to France, because we have more or less the same system, where really you have local officials that really want to do something, that are involved into the local life, and this makes a huge difference. I would say that we are, as the IB, we are supporting the municipalities in the regions, but we encounter the same problem as with the central government, which is the implementation capacity. Daniel was mentioning capacity, lack of capacity. This is something that is really dramatic at the public authority or the public institutions level. You have a lot of capacity in the private sector, in the real economy, but this capacity is not percolating into the public sector. So, and that I would make a parallel with France, my own country, where in fact it's quite the opposite. Everybody wants to leave the real economy to go to the safety of the government employment. In here, there is this problem, a fundamental problem that I see, and this is again, it's a deterrent for the real economy, because when you don't have a local infrastructure, when you don't have basic services, then you cannot operate. And the result is that everybody is running into KIEF to do business in KIEF, because this is the only place where you can have a decent internet connection, decent electricity supply or water supply, and decent roads. It's as simple as that.
Thank you.
And now, if you allow me, I'm going to open the floor for questions. We'll need some help, because it's just one move to have this microphone so that we will actually hear it. Hello. On behalf of Ukrainian Arab Council, we're happy to be with you today. And I would like to say, for Daniel, I'm really happy that you said that. But we, as investors, we are lacking something. In the beginning, we created Ukrainian-Arab bridge between Ukraine and Arab countries, and we had a really high-level event between investors. And of course, all investors see what kind of laws help them, which countries are calm, and if they have money in euros, and also that they also can get that back in dollars or euros. And we had lots of problems when we heard our politics. The President and Prime Minister said, of course, we understand there is a conflict with your neighboring countries. I hope it's going to finish, and we are praying for that. But when we talk, what are our politicians going to say? Well, you know, there is a war going on, and Russia may hit us. And our investors, I'm not going to say the Arabs, I mean, they are afraid to come here. We invite them, we talk to them. This is one problem. And actually, the culture of Ukraine is rich. Ukrainian land is rich, but marketing is very, very weak. So that's why please talk to us, to our colleagues and for investors. They are afraid. Whether it's calm or not, we said it's calm, but just recently, Lugansk governor invited us to Severodonetsk, and we wrote official memorandum to show our investors and Arabs, like, come there. It's very calm there. For 3 days, we were in Lugansk, and that's why, to show everyone that, thank God, Ukraine is a strong and calm country. And thank you. Okay, thanks. I didn't really understand the question, but still thanks for your comment. If possible, let's do questions, not comments. And please introduce yourself. Yes, Kovaliv, head of Cities Association. Great panel, great speakers. I can't but use the opportunity to make several proposals. All of those are based on understanding that investments is something just for the state. Investments is a positive story for the territories where these investments are actually put into. And that's why the first thing here, it seems to be very important for the communities to have the tools to make their territory attractive for the investor. And actually they have the city which wants investments. It is no different. And the only thing is that the mayor just takes the investor by hands and goes from office to office, but that's not systemic. So it's very important for the communities to have the tools to make their territory attractive from the point of rules of the game and everything. And now the communities almost have no such tools. Okay, I'm sorry. I just really want to hear questions, but that is a proposal. That is a proposal for government representative. And if this is just small things, we just want to hear the question. If it is a question, we simply want to answer. Yes, I understand. The question is whether it is possible to help us. Yes, okay, then what is done for that? That would be the question. The second would be the proposal for European Investment Bank. It's too bad that there is no EBRD representative. And the third thing is the World Bank. The thing is that we're talking about energy efficiency, and that is a huge market, especially thermal. It is 50 billion euros and more. And the thing is that small towns don't have access to this market, and we don't even have this infrastructure investments for that. And that is why the government, on behalf of the Ministry of Regional Development, can become this kind of intermediary who's going to take. And this is actually 3 structural investments in Ukraine on energy efficiency. They give the money to the state, and small towns have a chance to take a little bit for introduction of energy efficiency for the projects, which are huge for the territories. And the third thing,
and I think this is a proposal to the organizers of this event. Maybe we need a big investment foreign company, maybe, but definitely we need to have a champion for investment, a mayor or a governor who would be able to do it in the best possible way. And the territory might get some carrot from the state, the territory which does more for more, as they say, and they might get some, carrot, maybe to invest into the rehabilitation of the roads, and the territories have to be aware of such an opportunity. Thank you, at least for hearing me. Just a couple of words to answer. We do that at present. We have opened the office in Ivano-Frankivsk to provide services to 7 oblasts, and we are going to open another office in Vinnytsia to provide services to 5 oblasts of the central Ukraine. I mean the following. First of all, we have to talk to the investors in these oblasts and to understand their needs and questions to be resolved, and how we can help them to invest in those regions. And second, to work with the investment offices of the state oblast administrations, and where, and the key cities where there is a wish and capacity to provide this assistance, at how to develop the projects, how to submit the projects, and how to work with the investors in general. We are involving into this work Ukrainian, German Chamber of Commerce, which is working in this direction a lot, and PricewaterhouseCoopers, who is going to help us to develop the template. Sergei, just 30 seconds. It was a good question which has been raised. Unfortunately, now we do not have the tools to give an opportunity for the communities and the governors to proactively compete within the regions. And we are working on this now, and I hope that within the next several months we are going to offer the package of laws to support very good initiatives, and I emphasize that these are the initiatives which deal with the infrastructure. You were talking about the energy efficiency. Yeah, there are a lot of institutions. Do not let us not create the additional institutions. We have the Energy Efficiency Fund, and the international donors are providing a lot of funds there. Let us use the existing infrastructure. Well, yeah, so that we can move forward. Thank you. Alexandra Parbet. I am the representing the local self-government authorities. A couple of questions. The first one, you said that you have been working for 3 years and you were developing the foundation for 3 years. So when we are going to decorate the building? Because for the investors, time is key, and the turnover of capital is key. So this will be a good signal. The second question, what has been done during this year to improve the situation for the domestic investment? Mr. Khmelnytsky is from Ukraine, but all the rest are watching what we are doing here from afar. And the third question, do we have any filter for the investors who are coming? Well, I've heard the phrase, let us sell something, but we do not have to sell something. We have to be discreet in terms of selling. And the other example, just an anecdote, two companies are selling the alcohol, and they one company has decreased the price by $2, another added the $2 to the price, and they entered a different segment, and they earned a lot. And we are presenting Ukraine as an unable state, and we do not do anything for the people to start investing inside the country, just domestic investors. So these three questions, when we are going to continue building the foundation, to complete building the foundation, then think about the really good investment projects, and what we are doing to invite the reliable investors, and what do we do for the investors who are working domestically? Because we demonstrate this inferiority complex we have here. I didn't understand who this question was to. And not only Khmelnytsky is representing the national capital, Andrei also represents the national capital here. Yeah. I think that it's not exactly so. I have a lot of Ukrainian investors. I know 100 companies who are very positively developing the business and attract investments. They are learning how to do it. I wouldn't be that pessimistic, but we would like to improve it, and that's a normal process. We are looking for the opportunities, and that's great. We want to develop quickly. Time is key and crucial, but I wouldn't say that, the situation could be described as a catastrophe here. We were talking here about our problems, and this is one of the biggest. We cannot sell ourselves. And this is an example. Just the list of questions demonstrate the situation, how we are selling ourselves. We always are telling that nobody is doing anything and everything is lost. Well, maybe we have too high expectations about the magic wand that one resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers or 3 laws are going to resolve all the issues. We can wear the pink glasses, but there are no such magic wands. When we have introduced the automatic system of reimbursement for VAT, and it does not identify whether it's a Ukrainian company or a foreign company, it works on the whole list, and irrespective of who is the final beneficiary or whether it's a Ukrainian company or foreign company, the system works, uniformly. If the certificate is being issued online, it is being provided to any legal entity. We cannot say that we have different rules of the game for domestic and foreign investors. We are talking about foreign investment now because we have to carry out proactive marketing and to attract them. And we have to persuade them that it's a worthwhile destination. We have also partial insiders. When Danila said that the investors want to meet the premier, the presidents, I think we should have organized this work in a different way. Our government officials would like to meet the business representatives. Why the business wants to see them? Because the institutions do not work, because they face various problems, issues, and the enforcement agencies are attacking them. But it should be the other way around. The government officials have to ask business, what would you like to have here? Let us start a dialogue. This is what we are doing within the framework of our office. What do you need? 20 minutes. It's about beautifying the foundation and finalizing the decoration of the foundation. I think we should not beautify and decorate the foundation, because when you beautify, it means that you have completed the process. But the world is developing, it's moving forward. If there are new opportunities, we are going to change ourselves, and we are going to change together with the world, so that we are interesting to the world, and the world is interesting for us. So I would perceive it as an ongoing process. I was born in Ukraine, Kristina Klassen.
In Switzerland for years now. I'm very amazed by this panel. I'm glad I'm here, and thank you for your speeches. What I've seen is that what is lacking are basics. Like Jean-Jacques, you mentioned, companies don't know how to pitch. Yulia talked about lacking trust. Vasily talked about to keep the existing investors happy. You talked about, you expect people to come with solutions, not with problems only. And I would like to know from you, Andrei, because it's a long, long list of action items. Right, it's a long way to go. When you would have to set priorities to all the action items in this country to make it more interesting for investments, which one would this be?
Я бы начал со свободного движения капитала. Я с этого и начал.
I would start from the free flow of capital, and this is exactly what I started from my presentation. Well, we are going to complete our discussion. Thank you very much. Thank all the participants.